All right,
Okay,
I'll shut up
beautiful.
now.
Thank you, Glenn. Okay, so everybody, this is Bart Bouricius, and we're just here to have a good time tonight. Just for a little background, I would like to start by asking everybody to mute so that we don't get background noises in. Thank you very much. Bart has been studying forests and trees since 1973, when his graduate thesis at a University of Stockholm program in Sweden dealt with logging in boreal forests. He also received an MS at the Environmental Studies Center at the State University of New York at Buffalo in 1978, and later joined the faculty there. Bart has worked with the Rainforest Action Network for several years on rainforest protection, and for 25 years with a collective he founded, Canopy Construction Associates, building several treetop canopy walkway systems in the US, Central and South America, and in Borneo. He has also done research on various arthropod groups, modestly in the Amazon. Most of the photos you will see in this presentation are from work in Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia, and several photos are taken in Costa Rica, where Bart and his wife, Connie, lived for most of 6 years. Last but not least, he has worked with Bob Leverett, Wendell State Forest Alliance, the Sierra Club Forest Protection Team, and other climate groups. And so I would like to give a very warm welcome to Bart. And I think that we're just really going to enjoy this presentation. So go ahead and take it away, Bart.
Okay, I'm gonna share the presentation. It'll take me a couple of seconds to get it properly set up. It'll let's see, just a minute, and we'll put this over here, and then I have to rejigger it a little bit. It takes a couple of minutes to get it just right. Oops, that's not right yet. Hold on, bear with me. And I'm gonna do full. There we go. So we're going to look at symbiosis in nature through the lens of interactions of ants, plants, and birds. Often people confuse, excuse me, the term symbiosis with mutualism. Mutualism, however, is only one form of symbiosis, along with parasitism, predation, commensalism, competition, and more. But symbiotic relationships do not always fit neatly into one of these human-created categories. Often they straddle two or more categories. In this presentation, we will show examples of symbiotic relationships involving a variety of organisms. Much of this information is based on experiences living in Costa Rica and my years working in the Amazon basin. Here I am 140 feet up in a giant kapok tree, Ceiba samauma, in the Peruvian Amazon. This tree is only found in South America. The more familiar kapok species, Ceiba pentandra, ranges from Mexico through South America. Hundreds of epiphytic plant species may live in a single tree, which can be over 10 feet in diameter above the buttresses, buttress roots, and may have a 200-foot crown spread. There are several other tropical emergent tree species, such as Brazil nut trees or wild cashews, for example, that can attain similar dimensions, at least in terms of trunk diameter. We have also borrowed from new literature on ant following, such as the January 2021 review and prospectus of army ants following birds in the journal Ornithology, and a 2022 book by Daniel Cronauer updating army ant research over the last 20 years, entitled Army Ants, Nature's Ultimate Social Hunters. So here's a friend of mine. This is in the Peruvian Amazon, and my colleague Javier looks at a nest of ants in the genus Azteca. Through the world, throughout the world, ants are the dominant players in the terrestrial ecosystems, at least in the tropics and most places. Before his passing last year, eminent biologist E.O. Wilson estimated that there were over 11,000 species of life, including plants, animals, fungi, etc., that take advantage of ants through some sort of symbiotic relationship. Here is another Amazonian ant nest, which was about 100 feet up in an adjacent tree to a canopy platform. If people mute, okay. In a canopy platform, our construction crew had built. Notice how the structure has overlapping flaps like shingles on the roof of a house. That's probably how we learned how to do shingles from the ants. Javier is touching a larger Nasutitermes termite nest. Termites are important players on the global plant decomposition. They are now included in the same order with cockroaches, Blatoidea, and are not at all related to ants. Though termites, even though they're both social insects, though termites nests may be built with many substances, these nasute species use their excrement and saliva to construct nests. They eat primarily rotten wood and soiled detritus. They are not able to consume sound hard wood like the termite species in our area do. Nasutes are very common and have an effective weapon against ants that may attack the termite nest. Termite soldiers squirt toxic glue at their enemies, having developed a chemical warfare millions of years before humans set foot on the planet. So here we notice the nozzle-shaped heads of the termite soldiers for squirting the glue. This oak tree in the Belize pine savanna contains a 5-foot diameter ant nest above a smaller, quite different termite nest. Termites are said to consume roughly 28% of global net primary productivity. Therefore, at some point, 28% of all plant matter that has grown on Earth eventually passes through the gut of a termite. There are thousands of plants that have an intimate relationship with ants. Inga is a very large plant genus in the pea family. This genus contains small to quite large tree species. Inga trees are important to ants because they all have extrafloral nectaries. These nectaries provide sweet, high energy drink. Some trees provide ants nectar all the time, while other Inga species only produce nectar when the leaves are new and vulnerable. Ants, in turn, guard the nectaries and hence the leaves from caterpillars and other herbivores. And here you can see the ants on the nectary. And here's a larger picture so you can see what the nectaries look like. In Costa Rica, Inga trees are called guavas, not to be confused with the guava trees that we may be familiar with guava jelly and that sort of thing. Most of them produce tasty fruit, such as the ice cream bean, which is sometimes sold in the local markets. Costa Rica has 53 species in the Inga genus. Tropical America as a whole has roughly 350 tree species in this huge genus. Azteca ants comprise an important common genus of plant symbionts. Their sharply pointed abdomens are a good clue to their identity. This genus is particularly famous for inhabiting hollow stems of cecropia trees and attacking anyone who accidentally leans against the tree. Here is one example of the hundreds of plants that have mutualistic relationships with ants. In this closer example of the plant, you can see how the hollow structures here and then down here, you can see my pointer, I guess. Those hollow structures house the ants. They're called domatia. And here is a different, perhaps more upscale style of ant house, not so crinkly and crusty. You may have noticed that often these ant plants, or myrmecophytes as they're called, generally have dense hairs on them. My suspicion is that the hairs make it hard for some predators to get at the ants. You can see this is sort of a little, the ants move right along here where all this crud is accumulated from them. This is a Cenisero, or rain tree, as it's called in English, or one of the names for it. It's said to have the largest canopy spread of any tree, sometimes over 200 feet in its crown diameter. Here you can see my friend Costas over here next to the tree, and a horse also grazing under the tree for size. Here's Costas, and he's under the tree. There are easily over 100 species of epiphytic plants living in this tree, along with nests of several bird species, as well as many other organisms. Here are some orchids of a couple of different species, lots of bromeliads, Tillandsia bromeliads, which are similar to the Tillandsia that you find down south in the hanging from the tree branches, Spanish moss. The rain tree also collaborates with ants by providing nectaries. This tree can have a trunk diameter of over 6 feet, and like inga trees, it is in the pea family. Here you can see some of the nectaries and the Aztec ants. So here's a nectary here, another nectary here, and one of the Aztec ants. Not a great picture, but I just wanted to show that this giant tree also has a symbiotic relationship with ants. And this is my friend Craig Goldstein. He's measuring the 26-foot circumference of this tree. It's about the same size as the Sunderland sycamore, by the way, which a lot of you may be familiar with. It's the largest diameter single trunk tree in Massachusetts, the Sunderland sycamore. But there are plenty of much larger trees in the tropics, much larger diameter. And the Guanacaste tree is sometimes called the monkey's ear tree because its seed pods look like ears. The white arrow points to Craig right here. And he's at the base of the tree, which was 187 feet across its canopy. These trees also provide nectar for ants. Here's a peculiar plant in the Melastomataceae family with opposite and very different sized leaves on either side of the branch. It also provides domatia. You can see the domatia here and here, where the little leaves don't have anything. A very strange kind of plant. And here is a different style of ant plant, also in the same Melastomataceae family with very different kinds of domaceae, little ant houses. This one, here's a domacium at the base of a leaf in the same plant family. The Melastomataceae plant family contains hundreds of species. This one looks sort of more like, you might call it a scrotal domaceae. I told Lynn I probably shouldn't said that. She said, but yeah, people will think it's funny. So any rate, so here you can see this a distinctive leaf vein pattern typical of the plants in the Melastomataceae, which makes this family particularly easy to identify with these major huge major veins with the others perpendicular to them. So in this particular case here, a clothed primate opened a domatium to find an ant queen inside with the egg and 2 larvae. Here you can see the larvae, and there's this little tiny egg. Each side of the domatium will have a different queen in it. And there may be, you know, hundreds or even thousands of queens in a particular tree in the Melastomataceae family. There's at least 3 genera. I think there's actually 4 genera that have the same that have relationships with ants. And here you can see the worker ants, all sisters, are trying to defend their larvae. And what we have here is what's called a devil's garden, as they are called in the Amazon. These forest clearings contain only plant species with the Latin name Doria hirsuta. In the background is my friend Winnie Pinedo, who led me to this garden. And these areas with only small saplings and shrubs may be found in the middle of old growth forests that have no trails going to them. And they are said to be planted by the mythical Chula Chaki. Here's Chula Chaki, an artist's rendition. And you will notice Chula Chaki is an Amazonian Quechua dialect name meaning one-footed. Notice the hoof on the end of one leg and the human-like foot on the end of the other. Originally, most botanists assumed that, like black walnuts, this tree species deposited soil toxins to discourage other plants from growing and competing with these devil's garden plants, which were basically treelets. However, ant researcher Deborah Gordon, who wrote the wonderful book Ants at Work, had a different hypothesis. Notice the hairy, swollen sections of the stem under the leaves right here. And here you can see all the ants. Again, the ants in the hair, which may protect them. So Gordon's research team planted experimental trees in and near the gardens, the devil's gardens. The planted saplings, Cedrilla odorata, which is a tree that can get over 200 feet tall, by the way, were either permitted to be accessed by the ants that lived on the ant garden tree species that you see in this picture, or the ants were blocked from getting to the new saplings. This accessible plant, the accessible planted saplings were promptly stung by ants and died, while the saplings that the ants couldn't reach because tanglefoot, it's sort of like axle grease, but it's designed to prevent insects like from crawling up trees to eat tree leaves. Any rate, those trees remained healthy. It turned out that the ants were injecting formic acid into the leaves of the trees that died. The relationship of this particular plant and the ants is mutualistic in that the little trees provide a domasium for the ants to live in, or actually many. There's several of those swollen parts of the little treelet. While the ants protect the trees from marauding herbivore insects, as well as competition from other plants. Deborah Gordon's research showed that these ant colonies in Devil's Gardens may include up to 600 trees with 3 million workers and 15,000 queens. She calculated, based on the speed of how fast the ant gardens grow, that ant colonies may live as long as 800 years, at least on some of the ones she looked at, probably longer. It's based on the average annual growth rate of the ant gardens. So this image shows an ant garden that is totally constructed by the ants. You see them crawling on it. These ant gardens are made by ants sticking soil and other debris together in soil balls that may be as big as a basketball. They may be close to the ground or 100 feet up in the tree. The ants plant seeds of various plants in the garden and establish their colony inside it. The plants chosen by the ants often have extra floral nectaries, or they may be attractive for ant livestock, such as aphids or tree hoppers. The aphids or tree hopper livestock provide honeydew that the ants drink. Oh, there we go. Oops, back. I got to go back one. I have a slight tremor. Okay, so this is an interesting one here. In this case, some plants contain large hollow domaceae for the ants. In most cases, ant species from 4 different genera will share the same garden with a second ant species. One genus, Solenopsis, also happens to contain the fire ants. They're pretty good defenders of these plants. There is evidence that often the smaller ant species may tend livestock while the larger species takes a bigger role defending garden plants from herbivores. Also, researchers agree that some species of plants include all the known species from the genus Codonanthopsis. All of those are found almost exclusively in or adjacent to ant gardens. So possibly these plants, in effect, are ant-bred varieties or actually species. Some ants also collect vertebrate feces to fertilize their gardens. There are still many fascinating unanswered questions about ant gardens. What a great thing to do research on if you're a graduate student, I think. Another cooperative, mutually beneficial relationship involves the bullhorn acacia tree, and most commonly the ant Pseudomyrmex ferruginea. Here you can see ants drinking from the nectaries at the base of the leaves. Also notice that the compound leaves have smaller leaflets on their leaflets, making them bipinnate leaves. So I'm just going to show you. Here's the base of the leaf with the nectaries and 2 ants drinking from them. So there's 1 leaf, 2 leaf, 3 leaves coming out here. And the nectaries are, let's see, so those are at the petioles of the leaves is where the nectaries are. So here's an ant drinking from one of the nectaries, and there's a demasium also provided in the thorns here. The ant is on basically the two thorns coming out on either side. It seems advantageous for the acacias to make the ants, this is another very interesting thing. The nectar contains an enzyme that prevents the ants from being able to eat other forms of sugar. It seems advantageous for the acacias to make the ants dependent on them in this way, so they will have captive guards, essentially. Here, the same ant is inspecting a packet of nutrition provided by the acacia. The packets are known as Belchin bodies, named after Thomas Belt, the author of The Naturalist in Nicaragua, published in 1885. Interestingly, these nutrition packets are also consumed by a species of jumping spider, which gets most of its nutrition by stealing the Belchin bodies. Yes, a vegetarian spider that practices what ecologists refer to as kleptoparasitism. Here are the Belchin bodies on a young acacia tree leaflets. And here you can see the nutrition packets are produced at the end of each leaflet on a brand new growing acacia leaf that is especially vulnerable to attack by herbivorous insects. The Belchin bodies become ripe for picking consecutively rather than all at the same time. This ensures continuous ant patrols of the delicate new leaves to see if they are ripe yet. Here's a three-toed sloth. They often spend a lot of time in cecropia trees. Some cecropia tree species are guarded by Azteca ants that you saw earlier, which will attack you if you accidentally lean against one of these trees. Possibly the slow movements of the sloths protect them from ant attack. The peculiar patch on the animal's back is called a speculum. Only males have a speculum, which attracts females. Researchers suspect that males with brighter and more conspicuous speculums have more breeding success. Below my boot, my friend Winnie Pinedo climbs up behind me in a spiny Ceiba pentandra kapok tree. Notice the compound leaves of the smaller cecropia tree as he climbs past it into the upper canopy. We have to be careful not to disturb the cecropia leaves, as protective ants live in the hollow centers of these trees. So these are the leaves of the cecropia trees all over here. Yeah. Leafcutter ants are a very important part of most Western Hemisphere tropical ecosystems. Like scissors, the ant mandibles are not symmetrical. They grow a fungus on the cut up leaves, which are stored in the underground chambers of the colony, which might have as many as 4 million members. The fungus garden provides most of their nutritional requirements. Both leafcutter and army ants have many symbionts that live and or migrate with them, such as these millipedes that feed on the leafcutter colony detritus and sort of clean it up. An overview of Echaton burchilli army ant colony symbionts found that roughly 300 animals, there were roughly 300 animal species that depend on this one species of ant. This list includes over 40 species of mites, 30 species of flies, 30 species of beetles, and there are also, of course, many species of birds, as well as butterflies, wasps, springtails, bristletails, and these symbiotic relationships range from predation to mutualism. So this is one of the pictures actually from the ant researcher I mentioned before. This is an army ant bivouac. This is actually a different species. This is not, this is an ecotone species, but it's not ecotone burchili. But this is, so they'll build their, typically, but not always, this bivouac of live ants is established in a different location each night. There's also a period of time when they stay in the same place for a while. I've often seen them in the Amazon between tree buttress roots. This photo and the 3 subsequent ones were taken from Daniel Cronauer's website. Other than one bird picture, all the others are my photographs, a couple from Connie as well. In the American tropics, there are 2 very ecologically important species of army ant, ecotone burchili and Lepidus praedator. We have chosen to focus on ecotone burchili for several reasons. These much larger ecotone ants forage exclusively above ground, where the front of a raiding swarm may be over 75 feet across. This larger species also attracts a large number of birds and other animals that follow its swarm. The physically smaller Lepidus praedator, which frequently forages underground, probably has a more significant overall impact on the local ecosystem. However, without X-ray vision, following a mostly underground ant swarm is not feasible. The above image is of ecotone species workers and shows how they can string themselves together to build bivouacs or even bridges. This photo shows 2 males of ecotone burchili getting ready for their nuptial flights. They will march along with the rest of the colony for a little while before they take off. And so these giant ones here, this one is being helped along. Maybe he doesn't appreciate the help. It's being helped along by the very long-legged soldier. So they have very large eyes, which is sort of interesting because all the others are basically functionally blind, and I'll get to that in a second here. Here you can see mating going on. This is the male. There's his abdomen. There's the head with the big eye. There's the thorax and the wings. And this is the female. The females never have wings. When the colonies, reproduce, one new queen will walk off in one direction and bring a bunch of ants with her. So the winged males have big eyes to fly and locate queens or at other colonies. They don't mate with the ones right at their own colony, of course, but they do have comparatively small heads, possibly because they only have to think about one thing. The queens never have wings, and the colony splits 2 or 3 or sometimes 3 ways to form new colonies, which may include the original as well as new queens that walk away from the mother colony, like honeybees do when they form their swarms, except they're flying instead of walking. Because of this, the colony as a superorganism is potentially immortal. If you think about it, it's like the bacteria that exist today are in effect the same organisms that were around hundreds of millions of years ago, or even longer, because they reproduce by dividing in 2. Any rate, just an interesting thought. So here's what the soldier army ants look like with their distinctive ice tongue mandibles. And I can tell you that being bitten and stung by the soldier army ant is not pleasant, so I won't be trying this stunt again anytime soon. I took the picture while it was biting me, stinging me. And here are 3 different size casts of the Ecotone burchilli species. And here, a raiding colony of army ants, Ecotone burchilli, enters the house where we lived in Costa Rica for most of 6 years. The people in the neighborhood call these ants cleaner ants and are glad to have them visit for usually no more than an hour or so, removing cockroaches, scorpions, silverfish from the premises, and they do it free of charge. Here, the army ants carry a centipede they've captured on our porch. Even some small vertebrates like this young house gecko are not safe from the army ant swarms. The army ants also go after domestic ants that normally colonize houses, and we had plenty of them in our house. I became sort of fond of them, although Connie wasn't particularly happy about them. Here are a large worker carries a captured domestic house living ant under itself between its very long legs. The legs are very long because then they can carry a lot of booty underneath their bodies as they march along. So this is the house ant underneath. And a small beetle here is it's a little rove beetle that lives with the ant colony and marches along with the raiding ants. It's one of the many symbionts of the army ants. But the house ants have some clever defenses as well. During an army ant raid, they all leave their colony and separate, or shall we say, socially distance themselves so they can't all be found in one place. Here is one that has only molted fairly recently, and it curls up into this particular position, and the worker will carry it to a safe place so that it won't be discovered by the army ants, as its skin is not fully hardened. Several other ant species also use similar tactics to protect themselves and their young from army ant predation. The young ants hold themselves in this position so they can be easily carried. Here are 2 house ants, one with a baby, a larvae, hide on the doorknob, which is smooth and slippery and cool, and it's hard for the army ants to walk on it, and so they sort of stay away from it. So the house ants can see well, and while the army ants are functionally blind, except for the males, as I pointed out, only seeing light and dark, the house ants can see them coming because they have big eyes and can see quite well. You see the eyes there. I was at a tree climbing event in Costa Rica when army ants invaded the bedroom where some conference attendees were staying. We pulled an ant-covered mattress off of a bed and found this. There had already been a colony of domestic ants in the same genus as the ones living in our house, but a little darker color. They were living in this bungalow. Unmated winged queens were ready to leave on their nuptial flight to establish new colonies when they were rudely interrupted by the army ant invasion. The army ants have killed and cut up the large number of prospective queens. You can see some of their scattered wings. Here's one here and one over here. And you can see how there's like the separate abdomens are being carried off that have been severed from the thorax and the heads by the very long-legged army ants. And then So now we're getting to the birds, the last section. And these scarlet macaws are not ant followers. However, Carrara National Park near our home in Costa Rica was where these macaws were nesting, and it was where we encountered the greatest number of army ant swarms and consequently the bird activity. So according to a recent study of army ant following birds, over 12% of all the neotropical birds, including migrants that come from where we live, follow army ants. Ant attending birds are divided into two categories, opportunistic and obligate, more commonly referred to as amateurs and professionals. This turquoise-browed motmot is an opportunistic ant follower, occasionally getting some of its nutrition by attending the ant swarms. The broad-billed motmot is another opportunist. Birds that follow ants eat the insects and other small animals attempting to escape from the ant swarm. They don't eat the ants, not normally. These ant followers do not eat the ants except by accident if ants happen to be clinging to the bird's intended meal, such as a cockroach. In fact, getting stung too frequently by ants can cause allergic reactions, which may, on rare occasions, even be fatal to the birds. This pair of Lesson's motmots, formerly called blue-crowned motmots, are also amateur ant followers. However, these ant-attending birds generally precede the ants as they usually catch the creatures escaping from the front edge of the swarm. Although there is not always a clear line designating the swarm front, birds and the people watching them have to move around a bit to avoid accidentally ending up within the main body of the swarm. When this does happen, people have been known to remove their clothes. Modesty be damned when there's ants in your pants. Like the motmots, this white-whiskered puffbird is normally a sit-and-wait predator that occasionally attends army ant swarms. Ant-following birds eat quite a variety of swarm-driven animals, including katydids, cockroaches, centipedes, scorpions, spiders, small lizards and snakes, and even occasionally small mammals such as young mice. This chestnut-backed antbird is a professional ant attender, meaning over half its nutrition comes from its symbiosis with the ants. Most professional antbirds will check where the ants have established their nightly bivouac at the end of the day, so they can be there when the ants start swarming the following day at the break of dawn. You know what they say about the early bird. This bicolored antbird is another common professional who chooses a position a couple of feet above the ground. Many antbirds, such as this one, have developed the capability of clinging to vertical saplings in this unusual stance. The professionals move around between swarms when the arthropod activity becomes richer at a different spot. An individual bird of a professional species may quietly lead others of its species to a new location. The non-professionals eavesdrop on the professional ant followers who are more likely to be combative towards other birds, especially the amateurs. This black-faced ant thrush is a professional antbird who fills a niche running down prey among the leaves on the ground. The bird always holds its tail straight up. Connie and I suspect that this is to prevent army ants from running up the tail feathers. A female black-hooded ant shrike maintains a perch close to the ground. And there, this photo, you can more easily see the spots on the wings that help identify this particular bird. Though it is simply called a gray-headed tanager, this bird is also a professional ant follower, which means it's getting over 50% of its nutrition by attending the ant swarms. And the interesting thing is, among the ant swarm attending birds, there are several groups which take their common name from ants they associate with, including ant birds, ant shrikes, ant tanagers, ant pitas, ant vireos, ant thrushes, and ant wrens. Several wood creeper species are also ant followers. This wood creeper is eating a cricket that tried to escape up the tree that the bird staked out. It is a professional ant swarm attendant. This bird looks like the plain brown wood creeper, but this shot is from the Pacific coast where that species supposedly does not occur, and it may be a ruddy wood creeper. But then again, the birds don't read the books. Here's pairs of northern barred wood creepers often attend ant swarms, sallying from the vertical perches after insects scared up by the swarm. They typically sit 5 to 10 feet above the ground. These 11-inch long birds are among the largest wood creepers, a group containing 57 species, 18 in Central America, with 16 species just in Costa Rica. At least 6 of the Central American species are known to attend ant swarms. Here's another one. It's a tawny-winged wood creeper, another professional. It raises its crest while myself and Zach sat watching an army ant swarm actually in Belize. Looks like it has a mustache when it raises its crest. It also expands the white fluff under its beak. The great tinamou is a chicken-sized ground bird that opportunistically visits army ant swarms. As I mentioned, all these birds actually try to stay ahead of the swarms to catch running animals before the swarm does. For this reason, the birds are basically parasites of the ants. They are kleptoparasites of the ants, stealing the ants' potential food. There was originally some question about this designation, but now most researchers agree that it is kleptoparasitism. The cuckoos are also often opportunistic ant followers, such as this groove-billed Ani following an ant swarm in Belize. I have often seen squirrel cuckoos following army ants as well. This one was stunned when it hit our neighbor's window, but recovered okay. Here is probably the same bird on the following day. Unfortunately, this rare rufous-vented ground cuckoo is a bird we have never seen. So I borrowed this image from the internet. This is the largest Central American cuckoo at 20 inches. And it's rarely been spotted except when following army ant swarms. And it is a particularly coveted target for birders to see and stick on their life lists. Now, here's a peculiar thing. Some northern jacanas chased after insects scared up by army ants near a marsh. These birds are considered shore habitat specialists, but when they saw a line of cattle egrets at an army ant swarm, they ran over from the marsh edge to get a snack. And here you can see one of the cattle egrets that attracted them to go after the army ants. After the food the army ants were scaring up. Migratory birds such as some tanagers, several thrushes, including wood thrush, and a number of warblers such as the Kentucky warbler, and many other birds seen in our region also depend on ant swarms for some of their nutritional requirements when they're down south. I took this photo at an army ant swarm in Belize, and in fact, while in Central America, we have only encountered wood thrushes while they were attending ant swarms. This dependence on many migratory birds on army ants is an important survival factor that most North American birders are unaware of. I will say that the decline of this particular bird of the wood thrush is mostly due to forest degradation due to patch logging. There was a big study just done in Canada indicating this. It doesn't have to do with loss of the army ant habitat, which would also have an impact if that were the case. Two species of nymphalid family butterflies chow down on bird poop left behind by attending birds. This is a rich and important source of nitrogen for many species of butterflies. This type of symbiosis is called commensalism, where one species gains but has no effect on the other species. So there's a couple of butterflies. There's also some flies on the bird poop as well. So there's other animals that gain from the army ants' movements. And here we have a nice clear wing butterfly eating some bird poop, thinking, yum, look what I found. And one more. This is called an Imark, one of the Imark butterflies in the Mesosomia genus. Now, taking advantage of other animals to scare up food may be more common than we realize. This white hawk is a poor flyer, but gets food mainly by following troops of monkeys through the canopy as they scare up small mammals and reptiles in the trees, which the white hawk then catches and consumes. And here we have a double-toothed kite. Yeah, you say, how can kites have teeth? Well, they have a serrated edge with two tooth-like things at the edge of their beak. And lots of birds have serrated beaks. They're not real teeth, of course. And so they'll follow capuchins or squirrel monkeys in Costa Rica and also down into South America. And so here's one of the white-faced capuchins that they tend to follow. Even some of the professional ant birds, such as the gray-headed tanager and the tawny woodcreeper, will also follow troops of monkeys, such as the white-faced capuchins and squirrel monkeys. These birds capture insects that often drop from the trees to escape the foraging monkeys. So we might call these particular ant birders simply professional followers, following something that's scaring up a meal. There is a squirrel monkey. They're very significant because they can have huge troops. There can be more than 200 members. And before so therefore they cause a large number of small animals to drop out of the trees. We now have a few minutes for questions, if there are any questions. So people can unmute themselves.
Oh my gosh, Bart, that was fabulous. You did such a great job of showing the symbiosis and the food chain, the complexity of the food chain. And these photos have just been amazing to look at. So I really want to thank you.
I guess I will unshare, or should I just leave? No, I'll unshare so people can see.
Yeah, why don't we unshare so we can see each other?
Yeah, there we go. So
yeah, there was a question from David in the chat about whether the worker ants are female or non-gendered, and then Connie said they are considered female, and he said even though they don't produce children. So do you want to follow up on that?
Well, basically in most ant colonies, but with insects there's always exceptions. So in most ant colonies, the queen produces all the offspring, lays all the queen essentially becomes an egg-laying machine. The queen does not direct the ants and organize what they're supposed to do. She just lays a bunch of eggs. That's it. She may start the ant colony, but she doesn't do much once it's established, other than lay eggs. The males do even less. They'll just mate with the queen, and then they don't usually live too long. Sometimes they're eaten after they mate with the queen by the other ants. But there are some ants, like some of the primitive hunting ants, There's one called Paraponera, the bullet ant, which is considered one of the most painful stings of any insect in the world. And this ant, actually, all the females can lay fertile eggs. So, as I say, there's a lot of variability in ants, but it is true that most of them, it's only the queen that's laying the eggs, and reproducing. But all the workers, yes, are sisters. It's a big sisterhood.
Wow.
They don't need men, except, maybe once at the very beginning, and then they kill them and eat them sometimes.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
I see a couple hands up, Nancy and then Glenn. Go ahead, Nancy.
Nancy,
You're muted, Nancy.
unmute.
Your pictures are just amazing.
Well, thank you.
And I love the stories of the interrelationships, of the complexity of the food web. It's great. I know how difficult it is to take pictures of birds. Do you have any special tips for photographers, and what kind of camera do you use?
Yeah, the tip I use right now, I use the P1000, which it's a Nikon. It's a bridge camera. It doesn't cost as much as the real fancy ones, but it has the longest zoom of any camera in the world. And
I'd like to comment on Bart's photographic skills, because I take pride in them, since I basically taught him to take pictures. But he has one characteristic that I didn't have, despite he gave me a camera as a wedding present 52 years ago. But he has a lot of patience, and that is what I lack. He will sit for hours, and that's what you need. That, and you need to go to wherever they are.
well,
But he's gotten very good.
yeah. I'll mention that my friend Ray Aslan, who is a videographer and has done lots of wonderful, beautiful nature videos, he and I agree that you always get your best photos and video not when you're chasing after the animals. You get your best photos and video if you go and put yourself in a really good location and wait for hours. That's how you will get you plan what you're going to do and where the animals or whatever are likely to come to. And the best photographers always, if they're doing landscape shots, they always plan where they're going to be, where the sun's going to be, what time of day is the best time, and stuff like that. They don't do it usually the same day, unless they just happen to get randomly lucky.
It still seems like you would need a lot of patience.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, there's, especially in the tropics, there's always something interesting going on. So I don't find that I need a whole lot of patience. There's just all kinds of stuff happening. You just sit and wait. And when it comes, often the birds will be, like some of the small birds like the tinamou that you saw, maybe walking around, and you just sit and wait until they come into the open, and then you click, instead of trying to move over and get the best shot.
Yeah.
That's one piece of advice for nature photography. Anyway, there's somebody else.
So Glenn, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Bart. That was great. And while you were doing your presentation, for some reason, it triggered for me a book I read, 35 years ago, maybe, Barry Lopez, of Wolves and Men, where he talks about very similar relationships, mutualistic relationships, among wolves and ravens and other animals, in the northern boreal forest, but very similar concepts. I don't know if folks have heard of that book or read it, but it really, I think, goes through the same kind of ideas, but related more to our northern forests than the tropics. Barry Lopez is a great writer, and Of Wolves and Men is really a fantastic book that I would recommend for folks that haven't read it before.
Thanks
I've
for
read
that
it.
recommendation, Glenn.
Yeah.
Put it on your reading list. Bob Armstrong, go ahead.
Hi, Bart. You had a number of pictures taken by somebody else that you said you got from their
Oh,
website.
yeah, I have only 5 pictures essentially that were taken by somebody else. There may have been a couple of pictures taken by Connie, I think, but I don't remember which ones.
But a
And-
couple of those pictures were of ants suspending themselves
Yeah,
and
that-
forming patterns.
Yeah, those were taken by Kronauer.
Yeah, those are amazing. What I'm wondering is,
Oops, I don't know if this is gonna work.
no, it's not working.
I can't do it. You know what I gotta do? I'm gonna get off of my change this so people can see, but this is such an incredible book. I can't recommend it. You know, it's more highly. And let's move to, come on. How do I get out of here?
What are you trying to do,
I'm
Bart?
trying to,
Show us a book cover.
yes, I'm trying to get out of my background.
Oh,
Well, this might work, maybe. Nope, I've blurred the background, but it seems
blurred
to
the
blur the
background, yeah.
foreground too. So I give up. I can't show the book
what is it
cover.
called?
But at any rate, it's entitled Army Ants, Nature's Ultimate Social Hunters, and it's Daniel J.C. Kronauer, and it's his website is where I stole those images from. Since I'm promoting his book, I don't think he'll mind that
No.
it's not gonna work.
But Bart, what I'm wondering is, if we were to
Ah.
look at, if we were to look at one of those hanging webs of ants, would they be moving?
Well, the ones on the web might not be moving. Often when they make, say, a bridge or something, the
Yeah.
others will just march over them.
Would they be moving then? I mean, there would be ants crawling over.
There would be ants crawling
the
over the
superstructure.
ones that were providing the structural support. But the ones that provide the structural support, they'll make lines of ants together, and they'll cling together, and they'll get as many lines as they need to be strong enough to go. Sometimes they'll cover an area, they'll just be hanging there for a few feet, and clinging all
And for
together.
a few hours? I mean,
No, it's usually they move pretty fast as they're foraging.
Mm.
So it would probably be for normally no more than maybe the longest, maybe half an hour or so. Probably not much more than that. But they don't care. They can just hook on, and they don't have to do much. It's not like it's really hard for them. They sort of hook together and just sit there.
Uh-huh.
They're just pulled out,
but
and so-
out.
yeah.
So I just put David Kronauer. Is this Laboratory of Social Evolution and Behavior?
Yeah.
So I just
Yeah.
put that website into the chat if anybody.
And he is an incredibly good writer, and has done the most amazing research on army ants. This is after the last book on the army ants was about 20 years ago. He also, covers the driver ants from Africa, which are also very, big deal type of army type ants, shall we say, except they sort of dig into the ground a little bit. They don't just walk over the surface. They sort of make a road that they crawl in. We have some in Central America that do the same thing too. But there are many species of army ants, but I just focused on the one. There's a lot of others that have a lot of exciting stuff, with them too. So
Awesome. So David, you have your hand up. Go ahead. You're muted, David. Still muted.
Unmute yourself.
Can you unmute?
You could probably do it, Bart. No?
I don't think so.
Who's host?
Look on your lower left-hand corner of your screen.
Lower left corner and click on the microphone icon there.
I can
It's-
only
Oh,
ask.
there it
Oh, there
goes.
you
No.
There you go. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay, mentioned a few relations that are sort of balanced or mutually beneficial, like symbiotic or commensalate, or like epiphymomius, where a tree will supply a place but doesn't benefit or not. Are there parasitic relationships?
Oh, yes. I mean, this is the thing people are confused about usually is that symbiosis in popular usage has been conflated with mutualism. It's not the same thing. Symbiosis just means living together in some fashion. Parasitism is a type of symbiotic relationship. Predation is a type of symbiotic relationship, as is mutualism. But people, as I say, in popular usage, it's become, people think of it as only mutualism, and that's not what it is. And it's also, as I said, much more complicated than that, because many things that have become, say, mutualism might have started out as parasitism, and then through evolution over a long period of time have changed how things work. Because if an organism can gain something from a relationship that is basically parasitic, it might end up gaining enough so that it would no longer be considered a parasitic relationship. And it's an interesting thing. So these types of different kinds of mutualism are probably always in some kind of flux. Sometimes mutualism will become parasitism too. It's a really odd thing. But I think there is a tendency in general to move towards mutualism. From an evolutionary perspective, it makes a little more sense that would be a somewhat more likely direction to go.
Mhm.
But it's not so simple. I mean, I'm sure evolutionists could have long arguments about that sort of thing.
That is super interesting. Wow. Ralph, go ahead.
Bart, this has been really fascinating. Thank you.
Well, glad you liked it.
I'm wondering, obviously there's a myriad number of minute interrelationships among all these species. But from a broader standpoint, what do you think are some of the bigger pressing ecological questions that haven't been answered with respect to this general field that you've been talking about?
Well, I mean, this gets back into what is not so much fun anymore, because it as we start looking around the world, whether you're looking at what's going on, has been going on in Brazil with Bolsonaro, and thank God Lula has won the election. And I met him once. I had lunch with Lula and 12 other people, but any rate, I am so happy that he won that election. That's significant for the planet, actually. But the same thing is going on all over the place. The sort of the industrial devastation, the extraction of everything that can be extracted from nature that might make a buck is just a huge problem. And all these different kinds of relationships are always being impinged upon as either extractive forestry or the expansion of agriculture, or all these different kind of things keep pushing and pushing and pushing farther and farther into nature. And it's, you know, uh, part of my way of dealing with it is, you know, and probably a lot of people here do the same thing. You know, you go for a walk in the forest and you know, get some sustenance from that. But you know, that's why a lot of us spend a lot of our free time trying to improve things and decrease the impact of the industrial system, or the mega machine, as some people call it, on our planet. It's such a complicated thing with so many facets and aspects to, you know. I'm not going to get into that right now, though. This is I think back to the exciting stuff about the really cool things that are happening all the time, and that you just sort of you discover so many things just by accident. And you know, I've learned a lot of things from people that live in places, and they'll tell you something. You know, my friend Winnie Pinedo showed me the Devil's Garden, and I taught him when he was 18 to be part of the crew that would build the canopy access systems, some hanging bridges and stuff on the tops of the trees, to get so tourists could come up there and maybe appreciate that, you know, the hundreds and hundreds of species of plants and all the amazing birds and insects and everything that live up there. That my hope was that maybe a few people would become more involved in conservation efforts, I would say in preservation efforts, since the history of conservation is a little complicated. And it was funny when I worked for the Rainforest Action Network. It's like we won the battle that we were trying to win. We got the majority of the people to support the saving the rainforest, right? But the industry that was destroying it kept moving ahead, destroying it. It didn't matter what the majority of the people thought. And this is what we're having to deal with today. And you know, to sort of harness the energy from the majority to do the things that I think most people want to do. I don't want to get into strategies and tactics.
Well, I
It's
think one
not
thing,
time for that.
yeah, one thing I think that has been really valuable just about the talk that you've given tonight is, and raising people's awareness like this, to really see nature in a different way that we have. I learned so much tonight, you know, about nature and biology, and just to learn that makes me appreciate it that much more and want to protect it that much more. And the more we can get people's awareness to that level, that we really need to be proactive to protect this, then the better off we are, whether it's in the tropics or up here where we live. Does anybody else have any more comments or questions for Bart, or anybody else, discussion items? Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, one more comment in line with what you were just saying, Lynn, is that I think Bart's presentation shows that there's so much we don't know. You know, and of course we're very, I think most of us are very northern forest centric, and in a deep understanding of the northern forests, you know, where most of us are right now, 10,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, there was a mile of ice sitting on the land. And so the forest that we know, let's say it's an old growth forest, has gotten to a point after 10 to 12,000 years of development, you know, of species moving in, coming in, becoming part of that system. And so the complexity has been building. But when you go to a place that has never been glaciated, the tropics, the complexity is just beyond the ability of the human mind to comprehend. And I think that's what I saw in this presentation, that we understand bits of it, but obviously we don't understand the whole thing. I don't think we can, actually. I don't think we have the ability to understand the whole thing. And so that puts it into perspective for me, for the northern forests, is that we have perhaps a simpler system to deal with here, yet it has had 12,000 years of complexity being built, and we still don't understand even that short time frame and the impacts that we're having on it. And so we need to keep all of this in mind in our activist work as well, that we still need to be asking all of these questions, and like Bart said, spending more time in nature, in old growth forests especially.
Yeah,
That's my comment.
thank you. Thank you very much. So if we don't, I see people dropping off now and it's getting close to 8:30. We have
Oh
a
my
few
goodness,
more
yes.
minutes if anybody else wants to add anything or ask any final questions. Otherwise, we can.
I always say questions, comments, or arguments I'm open for.
No? Okay, so
I put it in the chat, but sort of, it's somewhere where I read somebody asked, what is the most dangerous invasive species on the planet?
oh, I'm glad you saw that. Yeah,
We are.
we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
No question.
Well, that is true.
So this is my own Zoom link here, and I'm gonna try to figure out how to, I can save this for sure, but I'll try to figure out how to send everybody a copy of this who registered.
That would be wonderful if we could
Yeah.
Okay.
get a recording, see the recording. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll try to figure that out. This is my first time, so if anybody can help me, that'd be awesome.
And thank you both.
Oh, it's
Wonderful.
your
Yeah,
first
thank
time
you,
for
Bart. Thank you so much. This has really been fabulous.
You might be able to upload it to YouTube. They will take long videos now.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
All right. Do you have to be a member of YouTube?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll figure it out. Thank you so much. It was really great to see you all, including people from out of town. That was great.
Yeah, it was nice. See a bunch of old friends and
And new ones
new
too.
friends.
Yeah. Okay. Again, thank you, Bart. Take
Right.
care, everybody.
Have a good night.
You
Bye.
too.